This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. There are a number of Browns who are going to be interesting to watch this season for one reason or another. And I have a list of them and I want to talk about these guys. So let's start. And my first guy that I find very interesting, or I think is going to have a very interesting offseason, is Maurice Hurst. Because for him, all the questions about him have more to do with his ability to stay healthy and, you know, his ability to shake off the rust after being out for a long period of time. I believe he'd go like 500 or 600 days in between his last game, at least a couple of years. And that's really the questions that you have about him. On the field, it's never been a question mark for Maurice Hurst. He's always been a solid run stuffer and a pretty good pass rusher at the defensive tackle position in the NFL and in college. If you remember back when he was at Michigan, he was one of the better players in the Big Ten to come out that year. Like, if you think about Mazi Smith and the level of prospect Mazi Smith was, I think that Maurice Hurst was considered a little bit better of a prospect during the college football season than like a Mazi Smith or somebody like that. Like, he was seen as a first round level prospect during the season, came up, he had a heart condition, other health issues popped up, and then that changed his draft stock significantly. But he still played well, still put up good tape. In Oakland, well, not Oakland, LA, now Las Vegas, and then went to San Francisco and played well. But again, the issue with him has never been about his ability to play football on the field, even though there's going to be some questions about his ability to play football because he hasn't played in so long, even though I think rust is less of a factor for somebody who plays in the trenches than like quarterback, right? Where there's just less going on to get used to, you know, getting hit. Basically, you know, I say a lot of like playing in the trenches is like boxing, like it's just fighting, and you know that stuff comes back to you. That's muscle memory. That eventually comes back to you. A lot of the quarterback stuff is a lot of mental nuances that you have to really engage yourself in to relearn. It takes a little bit longer, but that's one of the things that I would be worried about with Maurice Hurst. But I think that he's somebody to watch out for because, again, outside of Dalvin Tomlinson, that defensive tackle competition is wide open, and anybody acting like that's not the case is crazy, because you can see a world where Jordan Elliott starts next to him during the season. You can see a world where Perrion Winfrey starts next to him during the season. You can see a world where Maurice Hurst starts next to him during the season. Hell, I can see a world where Alex Wright ends up at 3 tech next to him, right? Like, I just don't think that competition is even close to having a winner yet. And I think the offseason is going to determine that. And I think Maurice Hurst is one of the most interesting names because, again, if he plays, he's good. But the question is, will he be able to stay healthy? Will he be able to play for this team? Will he be able to produce? And will the rust really be an effect of him? The next guy is Marquise Goodwin. I think he's going to be a little bit more productive for this team than people expect. Now, when I say productive, I don't think he's going to have like 1,000 yards or anything. I think he's going to be a guy who high end, you get what he gave Seattle last year, right? He gave Seattle 387 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a long reception of 38 yards. Like, that's kind of what you want out of him, right? 14.3 yards per reception. So like a long, deep ball guy, somebody to throw in there when you need to give Elijah Moore a blow. This is consistently what he's been throughout his career, and that's what I hope he brings to this team. And look, a guy who can bring you a small boost like that when it comes to big plays, and we talked about this, looking at the wide receiver room for the Cleveland Browns, not as a strict depth chart, but looking at them as a lineup, as a baseball lineup, right? Amari Cooper's the lead hitter. He's the guy who needs to get on base, the most reliable hitter that you have, but not necessarily the most reliable home run hitter that you have, right? And then you have DPJ, who serves a similar purpose to Amari Cooper, but just not as good as Amari Cooper. He's kind of like the Carlos Santana of this whole thing. And then you have your home run hitters, right? Marquise Goodwin and Elijah Moore. They're here to hit home runs, and then David Njoku, he's supposed to be, the four hitter. Like we could go all day with these analogies, but that's what you expect out of him, and that's what you would want out of him is to, hit some home runs, right? Like get some 20+ yard receptions. And when I say home runs, that's what I'm talking about. Some 20+ yard receptions. Let's get some big plays, some sparks when we need it. And that will be there. We know Marquise Goodwin, legit fast. Like not like Anthony Schwartz is fast, but like Marquise Goodwin is football fast. You know what I mean? Like that's a difference. Another guy I think is going to be interesting to watch is Dawand Jones, because Dawand Jones has been made into a story. People have talked about his lack of love for football, and they've made a whole topic about it. Well, camp's going to be a good opportunity to see that. And honestly, like, here's the thing with Dawand Jones. If Dawand Jones gets out there and it turns out that he's like fine, like the stuff that we heard about behind the scenes is not going to really affect him as a pro, I don't know how much longer Jack Conklin stays in front of him, because Jack Conklin is good, but he's getting older. He's not what he used to be. He's also not the most consistently healthy player on the team. Dawand Jones is younger, obviously, but he's bigger and he's much longer and he's more gifted. And I can see a world where Jack Conklin gets hurt in the season, Dawand Jones steps in, and if Dawand Jones does everything he needs to during the offseason, he might be able to step in. And that job's never going to go back to Jack, right? Like, I don't see a world where, I see a world where that can happen. And that's what's so interesting about Dawand Jones is if he comes into camp and he's a disaster, right? He's late. He's always getting in trouble. Like, it's clear that year one's not going to be his year. He needs a couple more years of seasoning to become a pro. And most of that's probably going to be off the field stuff, right? Like where he just needs to understand what he needs to do his job well in the NFL. If that's the case, okay, we're going to have to wait a couple years on this Dawand Jones program, and Jack Conklin's going to play out his contract. But let's say Dawand Jones ain't going to be on that program. He's on the, let me start right now program. It's going to get interesting, I'll say, right? Because I talked about this with G. Bush. And Dawand Jones is one of them players that coaches aren't going to like because he's so talented. He's so gifted physically and athletically. And he has such good natural feet. Well, not natural feet, but he's not the cleanest feet guy, but his feet aren't bad for a dude who's 6'8", 370 pounds or whatever he's sitting at, close to 400. Like, people rag on his feet. It's amazing his feet aren't more of a disaster. If you want to see a big tackle with bad feet, look at Daniel Fale, right? Like, and compare that, his feet are significantly better than like Orlando Brown Jr. People always talk about Dawand's feet. It's never mattered in a game. But let's say Dawand Jones, because Dawand Jones has all those gifts. He's somebody that coaches feel useless around because you're going to try to coach him up. You're going to try to give him tips. Nothing you have is going to be helpful to Dawand Jones because, yeah, you could do this trick, or Dawand Jones could just reach out and push somebody because he has the arms long enough to do it. That's what I'm saying, right? Like, coaches aren't going to be the guys who love Dawand Jones. Quarterbacks, players, they're going to love Dawand Jones because he's going to keep dudes clean. But it's going to be interesting to see, right? Because, like, how much can Dawand Jones dominate in camp before Deshaun Watson decides that's who I want blocking my right side? Because that's also going to have a factor, right? Who does Deshaun want out there? Who does he trust out there, right? So Dawand Jones going to be interested to see what happens with him, right? Because if the I don't love football stuff kind of comes up and is an issue, then we're gonna have to wait a couple years on that. But if it's not, I see a world where Jack's job could be in trouble if he misses one game. And if I'm Jack Conklin, I'm going out there with all the braces. I'm not taking a risk, dog, because if DeJuan gets in there, he might not leave. Another guy who's interesting is Alex Wright, because I just don't know where they're gonna put him. Right? Like it would not make sense for him to play a ton of edge, but maybe he does. And where does he factor into this rotation, right? Because we're talking about Ogamonia, we're talking about Myles Garrett, we're talking about Za'Darius Smith. That's already 3 names. And then is he competing with IT for that 4th spot? So it's him and IT going at it for that 4th spot. And if we're talking about just pure pass rushers in that scenario, not overall, I'm not saying that Isaiah Thomas is a better player than him overall, but what I am saying is that in that scenario where you need a 4th pass rusher and just somebody to get out there on the edge, Isaiah Thomas is proven more effective than Alex Wright in that way. So you probably put Isaiah Thomas out there. Where do you put Alex Wright? This is why I'm like, I think he needs to go inside a little bit more, or we need to get creative with how we use him, because he's not somebody who could sit out there wide on the edge. Okay. So then you have to look at different packages. He's somebody who could play a traditional 4. He could play a little bit of 3I and a little bit of 3T. But if you move him to those positions, there's limited amounts for opportunities for snaps, because at 4, he's not going to play 4 because you got Za'Darius and Myles there. So maybe when they need a blow, but they don't want to go out wide to kind of like compensate, and they're going to be rolling Ogabonia out there, you're probably not compensating. Or are we going to get a different rotation to where Ogabonia is just going to be kind of a specialist? And then you still have Isaiah Thomas and Alex Wright anchor the edges as the true backups to those two. And Ogabonia is just kind of a floating point instead of a 3rd man in this rotation. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes, because that's going to kind of dictate what they do with the rest of the edge rush rotation there. The other guy I want to talk about is my man Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward, right? Because they're going to get a lot of flack because the secondary was not good last year. Now, outside of Cleveland, they don't know why it wasn't good. Inside of Cleveland, we know what happened, right? We watched what went down. We know that it wasn't that Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome forgot how to cover. It was because we had Denzel Ward playing the flat and cover 2, and we had Greg Newsome out here playing linebacker, right? We understand what happened last year. So for them, this would be an opportunity to reintroduce themselves, because now they're going to be playing a lot of outside corner, a lot of press man, a lot of what they've been asking them, what they've been wanting to do, and a lot of following guys, right? So now we're going to see, like, hey, are these guys as good as we think? Denzel Ward, he's proven that he's a great corner. He can reprove that to everybody. And Greg Newsome, this is his opportunity to blow up, right? Like, if he wants to get to that next level of corner conversations instead of just being a guy with potential and a legitimate great corner in the NFL, this is his opportunity to make that leap. Playing a lot of press man, going to be on the island, going to be given a lot more responsibility. I talked about this on sportsforcleveland.com when I was on that show on Thursday. And one of the things I brought up is when you have talented players, the defense does not have to be as complicated. Same thing goes for offense, right? When the players are very talented, you have to do less, right? It's kind of like when you are if you watch like Jokic play basketball and you watch like Giannis play basketball, they look two completely different, because Jokic is not as athletically gifted as Giannis. He has to do more of the tricks, right? He's got to get a little bit more crafty to get his buckets, where Giannis can just bam, just run up the middle of the court and slam it. He doesn't need all the extra nuances. That's the same thing with defense. When you out there running with nobodies, like look at Bill Belichick, when he's out there running with just dudes, he's able to put together a good defense because he can scheme stuff up and get complicated and confuse you before the snap happens, and that's great. But when you got the bodies, you ain't got to do that much. You really ain't got to do that much when you got the bodies, right? You look at Georgia's defense in college football, all they do is play press man on the outside and just rush 5, right? It's not complicated at all. They're not trying to confuse you. Georgia's not tough to beat because they're complicated. And this is why I say college football is one of those things where the reason coaches that are good in college football don't transfer to the NFL is because To be good at college football does not require you to be smart about football. It just requires you to have the best players. If you have the best players, you're a genius in college football, right? Urban Meyer comes to the NFL. He's a disaster because he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to some of this stuff. But he does it in college football, and he's fine because he can have the most talented players because he can recruit, and he's Urban Meyer. Same thing happened with Kirby Smart's another interesting one, right? We never thought he was a genius until he got the best players. You can get the best players in college football and just keep it real simple. And that's why college football coaches don't really transfer to the pros most often, because a lot of guys are just winning in college because they have better talent. And when you have better talent, things don't have to be complicated. The thing that's been frustrating with the Browns, bringing it back to the original point, is we have had the talent, but we've been doing the complicated stuff that you would do if we had a bunch of bums out there. This is now that Jim Schwartz is here, he's going to empower the talented players on this team to be talented. And we're going to see if that's going to pay off or if that's going to be a rude awakening. And maybe Joe Woods wasn't crazy. Maybe he was doing this because these guys weren't talented as we thought. But that's going to be what we're going to find out. And I think those two are kind of in a boom bust situation, right? Especially Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome might get paid off the work he does this season. He might not. Off the work he does this season, but he's going to get an opportunity to show himself this year. Jordan Elliott and Perion Winfrey, look, somebody got to win that battle. I think they're going to be interesting to watch. And Ronnie McLeod's going to be another one that's interesting to watch and see how they use him. Are they going to use him just like they did Ronnie Harrison back in the day, or is it going to be a little bit different of a strategy? But those are the guys on my list. Let me know who's on your list in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a great night.